Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about all of the stuff that could be happening this month. It seems like it's going to be a crazy month in college football, especially for an April, and that is this far away from college football season. It's going to be a little bit off the walls, but let's jump into Notre Dame. There has been a ton of talk about Notre Dame. Obviously, conference realignment is happening all over the place. The ACC being the kind of center of the conversation there. Conferences like the Big 12 and the Big 10 and the SEC are becoming more powerful by the day. It seems the Pac-12 and the Big 12 trying to stay towards the top of the game as best they can right now. So tons happening across the country. And then there's Notre Dame, kind of just sitting in the middle of all this, watching all the craziness happen around them, being an independent and not having to worry about it. And there's been a lot of question, will Notre Dame finally join the Big Ten or finally join the ACC with all of the craziness going on? And it doesn't seem like they're going anywhere. It seems like, according to Notre Dame AD Pete Bevacqua, there has been no question that they feel as secure as ever being a independent. They feel and they're in a very, very good position. Obviously, you see there's a quote actually from Pete Bevacqua that I want to get to here. We are in as good of a position in the modern era of college football to be an independent. You see all conference realignment. You see everything that's happened. I think our position as an independent in football, quite frankly, is certainly more unique than ever and also more valuable than ever. And I'll kind of break down the two parts of that. Obviously, it is definitely more unique than ever. Everyone is trying to get into a conference. Everyone really wants to get a piece of the pie and be a part of the conversation as everything gets a little bit crazier. But Notre Dame is in a position where they don't necessarily need to be in any rush. Obviously, the agreement they made with the college football playoff, where they make $12 million annually and would make another $6 million if they were to make the playoff, so 18 if they were to make it, which there's been very few years in the past decade or so where Notre Dame has not been one of the top 12 teams in the country towards the end of the season. So there's a very good chance that they make that full 18 million. And if that's the case, that finds them way closer to the SEC and the Big 10 of this equation than the ACC and the Big 12. Because if you get up to 18, the SEC and the Big 10 are only at 21 million. So definitely a little bit above you, but not the gap that there is between the ACC and the rest of the group, because the ACC is down at 13 million, Big 12 12 million. So Notre Dame is in a position where at the very worst they're making as much as a Big 12 team. I think the majority of these years going forward with the 12 team playoff, they'll likely be making up to that $18 million because I think they'll be a playoff team the majority of the years. Obviously not every year, but I think this is a Notre Dame team that will find themselves in the top 12 teams of the at the end of the year, majority of the years, I would assume. But as we talk about this situation, the ACC is obviously very much in flux, and that very much affects Notre Dame because they're in the ACC for a lot of their sports. Pretty much everything non-football, they are a part of the ACC, and that makes it very interesting as we go into this kind of next era of the ACC, because I can't imagine Notre Dame has any desire to stay in that conference if the Clemsons and the Florida States and North Carolina, Virginia, all those teams start to follow. I can't imagine that Notre Dame basketball and the rest of these sports want to be a part of that conference any longer. So it looks like they're going to have to make a change at some point. And then the question is, do you go fully independent with every one of your sports? Do you find another home for the Olympic sports and basketball and all of those sports in the Big Ten possibly, or do you just fully join the Big Ten? And that's the big question, because if you're the Big Ten, I'm not necessarily sure if you're willing to take Notre Dame without the football as a piece of it, because you're in a position, if you're the Big Ten, where you kind of get to call the shots in pretty much every scenario. You are sitting at the top of the table. You are the one that everyone's kind of turning to in a lot of these situations. So the Big Ten is in a situation where if Notre Dame comes knocking and wants to be in their conference, it's very possible that they say, well, it's an all or nothing proposition. You're either going to be totally in this conference, football included, or you're not going to be totally in this conference. So it'll be really interesting to see all that develop. I think it's funny, we talk about college football so often, but it's very real reality where these other sports that are not affiliated with football at Notre Dame will have a direct impact on the football team, I think, in the coming months and definitely in the coming months as we kind of get a better idea of what the future in this craziness that is conference realignment looks like. But another reason that Notre Dame is in a great position is obviously their contract with NBC. They have pretty much an exclusive contract with them to televise all of their games. That is a contract that brings in about $50 million a year till about 2029. So they're in a position where you're not really in that big of a rush. Obviously, the SEC and the Big Ten get a bigger piece of the pie in their media deals. I believe it's $60 million for all the SEC teams and close to $100 million for the Big Ten teams, if I'm not mistaken. So these contracts are going to be very interesting, and it'll be interesting to see if the SEC and the Big Tens change as they kind of garner more power, maybe add more teams. But Notre Dame right now is firmly sitting in that third position, kind of on their own in the college football world. So it's not necessarily where they want to be. I think they would love to be at the head of the table with the SEC and the Big Ten. But at the end of the day, if you can keep that unique aspect of yourself, that Notre Dame being independent, being specific to themselves, which is obviously something that is very important to Notre Dame fans, while still being a part of the conversation and being in the realm of those two conferences, I think that's a huge win. So it'll be interesting to see all of this develop. Obviously, as Pete Bavacqua said when he was talking about this, the NBC relationship, they also have ACC Network they're affiliated with. The playoff, as we talked about, was a great deal for them. They're in a really good place financially, and Notre Dame's never going to be in a bad place financially, but it'll be weird to see kind of how all of this develops and if, some teams kind of start to catch up to them. Is there another round of conference realignment that gives the Big 12 more power and kind of gets them towards where Notre Dame is at? Or is the ACC crumbling going to benefit the Pac-12 and let them kind of get further into the picture? So there's a lot of moving parts here, and Notre Dame just kind of letting all the craziness happen around them, and then they'll make a calculated decision towards the end of this, I think. So but there's a couple of layers to this as I look at it. Obviously, everyone has an opinion on Notre Dame. If you're a college football fan, you have a pretty aggressive opinion on Notre Dame, it seems, at least the majority of people. I think when you look at this situation for Notre Dame, obviously they're in a great position. They are Notre Dame. They are in a position where they have about as much money coming in as they could possibly need. They don't have to affiliate with another conference, which gives them a little bit more autonomy over everyday things within their program. They have that, we're Notre Dame and we stand alone type of mentality, which is something that's super important to them and all of this stuff. And obviously, you want to be a big-time brand, which was another reason the AD kind of pointed to Notre Dame wanting to be independent. They wanted to be standalone. They wanted to keep their high-level brand in college football, and I totally understand that desire, right? I totally understand Notre Dame being fully confident in their position, and I would be too. But I don't necessarily think that this means they are in a position where in 5 years they aren't looking back on this saying we definitely should have joined a conference. And it's not necessarily to say that Notre Dame's going to, fold overnight or anything like that, or they're going to, really start to struggle. But at the end of the day, the sport is changing very quickly, and more power is being put in the SEC and the Big Ten's hands. More and more power is being put in conferences' hands in general. So the independent teams, whether they like it or not, are losing a little bit of that power. And going back to their idea that they want to be a standalone big-time brand in college football, that's not really a thing that you need to be independent for. I get that's been Notre Dame's thing for a really long time, but the big-time brands in college football that we talk about all the time that have been towards the top of the sport are there not because they're standalone, because a lot of them are in conferences, not because they have this very unique aspect to them that is not shared by anyone else. it's because they're good at football. It's because they have this history of being remarkable and being a huge part of college football. So Notre Dame has that. I don't think that's going anywhere if they were to join the Big Ten. Obviously, there will be a little bit different of a situation for them, but you get to play the big time teams, you get to play the big time games, and maybe there is a little bit of, if you join the Big Ten and you start to lose 4 or 5 games a year, it doesn't look as good. That's definitely for sure. But if you are Notre Dame and you're so confident in your position and you stand above everyone else and have this remarkable brand and this remarkable football program, it shouldn't necessarily worry you going into the Big Ten and facing the Ohio States and the Michigans and the Penn States of the world, because you should be able to beat them, right? So I think it's a very interesting conversation around Notre Dame. It's always been something that I've never fully understood, this idea that you have to be independent to be a big-time brand in college sports just isn't true, and that's been proven time and again. One of the biggest brands in all of the sport, Texas, has been in a conference their entire history, pretty much. So there's obviously, I get that Notre Dame wants to be unique. They want to stand alone. They want to be specific in this college football world that is becoming more consolidated and more group-based. But at the end of the day, I think they are in a position right now that is about as good as it's going to get for the next decade. I think the SEC and the Big Ten are going to garner more power. I think the ACC will likely start to kind of fold out of the picture, but the Big 12 and the Pac-12 will get stronger because of it. I think Notre Dame, although their position will still be as one of the premier programs in the country, you can't necessarily match up to the 14 or 16 or 18 teams that are walking in from the Big 12 or the 16 teams that are walking in from the Pac-12 in 3 years. So there's definitely an idea that Notre Dame is in a great position today. I tend to believe this is about as good of a position as they're going to be in going forward. So if I was the Notre Dame AD, if I was the Notre Dame president, I would be putting out feelers, getting an idea of what conferences would be willing to take us and what the future would look like there. But right now they look content. They look like they're going to hang out being an independent team, and they seem to feel really confident about that. I wouldn't feel quite as confident in terms of the long-term future, but in the short term, they should be okay, and they should be in the playoff and in the conversation for quite some time. But things happen pretty quickly in college football, and they could fall from graces relatively quickly if a lot of the things that I expect to happen over the next couple of months start to happen. So it's definitely something to keep an eye out on. I think Notre Dame at some point will join a conference. I just don't know when that's going to be. I think the ACC might force their hand there, but definitely tons to keep track of there, and we will definitely keep you up to date with everything happening around them, because they're a huge domino in this game, no matter really what their status is. So it'll be really interesting to see all of this develop. But we're going to take our second break here, and when we come back, we're going to talk about the hip drop tackle. There's obviously been a huge change to the NFL rules banning the hip drop, and some people weren't too happy. So we'll talk about the implications on the college level and kind of how everyone's handling it at the college level after this. So stick with us.